Hello folks! Welcome to Jack Reviews Musicals. If this is your first time seeing my face, my name is Jack and I am a musical theater superfan based in St. Louis, Missouri. This is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts on all of the musical productions I go out to see, and I am so excited to finally talk about New Line Theater's production of Green Day's American Idiot, which played at the Marcelle Theatre from September 12th through October 5th of 2024. For their 33rd season of producing alternative adult musical theater, New Line Theater is producing all revivals, musicals that they have produced in the past but have brought back due to popular demand. And the first show that they're bringing back is American Idiot, which they first produced back in 2016 before the election. And now they're producing it in 2024 before the election. 2024 also marks the 20th anniversary of the musical source material, Green Day's seminal punk rock opera of the same name. And as far as this adaptation goes, it is also the 15th anniversary of its creation by Green Day's frontman Billie Joe Armstrong in collaboration with Tony Award-winning Spring Awakening director Michael Mayer. Now, I discovered American Idiot when I was a sophomore in high school. Well, that is the musical and not the album. I grew up listening to Green Day's music, so I was already a fan going into it. But this was during the time where I was taking my fandom of musical theater into full gear. And during that time, I was realizing that I really loved musicals that were just completely obscure, off-the-wall bonkers, and American Idiot is definitely that. When I discovered it, at the time, I thought that adapting a studio album for the stage, like creating a story out of it, was very novel. And because I was studying theater in high school, I eventually became obsessed with picking apart all of the different ways that Billie Joe Armstrong and Michael Mayer were dramatizing the material for the stage in ways that I thought were genuinely interesting and insightful. So for those of you who don't know what American Idiot is, it was released in 2003, post 9/11, and it is at its core a protest album, making the stage version a protest musical. Green Day created American Idiot as a very vicious response to American culture and politics post 9/11. The Bush administration, the war on terror, and the stage musical actually does retain the album's setting, 2003. The actual story of American Idiot centers around a character called the Jesus of Suburbia, who in the musical is referred to as Johnny. Johnny is a 90s kid who is raised on a steady diet of soda pop and Ritalin. Now 20-something in the year 2003, he has found himself a total unwashed slacker, stuck in the sleepy suburb of Jingletown, USA, drowning himself in beer, weed, his own body odor, and a constant stream of television. Hey, what do you know? He's a regular Discord mod. So the inciting incident of the show is Johnny goes out partying with his fellow slacker friends, Will and Tunny. And Johnny has an epiphany where he realizes that their lives really are going nowhere fast. And so he challenges them to take charge of their own destiny for once in their lives. And so the three friends decide to go their separate ways to find their own path to navigate the troubled landscape of post 9/11 America. Johnny borrows money to buy a bus ticket out of the suburban Jingletown and into the big city. Tunny becomes seduced by American military propaganda, who in the musical is represented by a character known as the Favorite Son, and Tunny enlists in the army to fight in the war on terror. Will, however, has to stay home in Jingletown because him and his girlfriend Heather are having a baby, so now Will has to hunker down and prepare for fatherhood. But as time goes on, the three friends discover that what they thought were going to be the perfect lives for them actually turn against them. Will finds himself completely ill-equipped to be a father. He keeps finding himself getting stuck in this endless cycle of wanting to do nothing but smoke weed, drink beer, and watch TV or play video games all day. And Will's compulsive laziness eventually leads to negligence that forces Heather to take her and Will's baby and leave his ass. Meanwhile, Tunney is deployed on a tour in Afghanistan, and he ends up severely wounded, both physically and mentally. And even meanwhile, Johnny, in the city, finds love and companionship. Johnny befriends this Tyler Durden-esque non-binary drug dealer named St. Jimmy. St. Jimmy is the representation of the punk that Johnny always wants to be, completely wild and crazy and severely unhinged. And they give Johnny the drug-fueled confidence to start a relationship with a fellow directionless punk, What's-Her-Name. And as Johnny and What's-Her-Name start their relationship, they find that What's-Her-Name is turning out to be a very calming, very grounding presence for Johnny. And so the two of them become more and more committed. Once they do, however, St. Jimmy starts becoming possessive over Johnny. In order to keep Johnny as a part of St. Jimmy's drug den, they keep Johnny dependent on hard drugs. And at Johnny's lowest point, where his addiction has really reached as far down as it could go, St. Jimmy manipulates Johnny into choosing a life of drugs and depravity with them instead of a loving, stable relationship with What's-Her-Name. A decision that does not end well for either of them. And all of these story beats altogether are told almost exclusively through Green Day's music. Outside of narration and monologues, there is little dialogue in the show. It's almost all sung through, and it's 90 minutes long, with no intermission. It really is a straight-up adaptation of the American Idiot album. The experience of watching it is like listening to an album. None of the album's songs were cut, and the order of the songs was not changed at all. They actually added more Green Day songs into it to expand the show to musical length. They used B-sides from American Idiot's singles, for example, Favorite Son and Too Much Too Soon, and they used songs from Green Day's follow-up album to American Idiot, 21st Century Breakdown, namely The Last Night on Earth and 21 Guns. The rest of American Idiot, fully intact. And most of the songs on the album have pretty much become Green Day's biggest hits by far. There's the title track, of course, but there's also Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Wake Me Up When September Ends, and even after 20 years, these songs shred like nothing else. The raw, intense emotion of the music is still there, as well as the dense lyrics that are so honestly emotional in their poetry. And a lot of people forget, yes, American Idiot is protest music, but also at the same time, it's a very human story. It's a story about how American culture does whatever it can to power through this complete mess that we are in post 9/11. And now, in the 2020s, post-COVID. And this is something that I think the musical understands on a pretty fundamental level, to the point that they took these songs and focused them on every individual facet of American youth culture in 2003, with Johnny being in the city, with Will being in the suburbs, and Tunney being in the war zone. And it's that level of insight into this music and the story that is within it that makes Green Day's American Idiot the musical a true masterwork. Something that I have had a problem with in other musicals before, but not necessarily here, is that there is so much story and so many characters being packed into this one-act, 90-minute package. So because of that, American Idiot is always on the go. It's always on the move. The pacing is very, very fast. It hardly ever stops. It is probably going to be hard for people who are unfamiliar with Green Day's music to keep up with the story beats and how fast they're moving. And when the few ballads pop up in the show, like Last Night on Earth and Wake Me Up When September Ends, there is a possibility that the audience is gonna struggle a bit with their attention. And the same thing could easily happen to people producing the show. It would be so easy for a theater company to do American Idiot and just make the plot beats feel cluttered if they don't stage it right. This was exactly the problem that I had with the Muni's production of Dreamgirls. You can click on the card in the top right corner of the screen if you want to hear my issues with that show. But for New Line, they have a bit of an advantage. This is the second time they're producing this show, so they pretty much know it inside and out. And New Line Theater is a company that are dedicated to producing musicals that are basically calls for social change. So that means they have a pretty deep respect for musical theater as an art form. And so for this production, the co-directors Chris Moore and Scott Miller have infused all of the love and care that they could into staging this show. It really does feel like a labor of love on their part. Chris Moore and Scott Miller brought so much nuance and detail into their staging of this. All of the story beats were clear. All of the staging was so thoughtful. They actually used every inch of the Marcelle Theatre, even the aisles, to keep the pacing aggressive as it is. Moore and Miller gave everybody involved with this production so much to work with. They made this absolute whirlwind of a story feel cohesive and real. Even starting with the ambiance. It was absolutely perfect just walking into the theater. Set designer Rob Lippert places the show inside of this hazy, gritty alleyway, configuring the audience on one of the longer walls of the Marcelle Theatre. And this set looks like every punk safe haven. There's junk littered across the stage. There's torn up furniture, ripped sheets, beer bottles, bongs, newspapers. All of these props were curated by Mallory Golden. There's multi-level platforms that distinguish between the locations. There's anti-war, anti-Bush graffiti spray painted on the walls. There's an anarchy symbol that is prominently featured center stage. And the band is even placed behind a real chain link fence that becomes a part of the scenery. It's a fantastic set, and the atmosphere is augmented by Ryan Thorpe's lighting design, which is very industrial in nature, with lots of reds and blues and greens. And this cast, oh my god, this cast, when they are performing on this set, they are so fearless, they are so committed. They all perfectly capture the anxiety, the distrust for authority, the anger, and complete disregard for other people's personal boundaries that was youth culture in the early 2000s. Their movements bounding across the theater and full face shouting at the audience, they were so gleeful in their controlled chaos. The choreography that they have to perform is intense, as it was conceived by Chelsea Johnston. And it's choreography that ranges from coordinated headbanging to even a full-on dream ballet with Extraordinary Girl. The featured dancers in that number were Gabriel Anderson and Kat Penninger. The rest of the excellent ensemble consists of Alex Giordano, Amora Marie, Ian McCreary, Nathan Misi, who served as the production's technical director, Hannah Renee, and Vanessa Simpson. And the characters are also outfitted in early 2000s punk fashion. Lots of flannel, lots of ripped jeans, lots of fishnets, lots of acid splashes, and lots of baggy jackets. The costumes were designed by Lauren Smith Bearden, and every single one of these cast members feels distinct with their own personality, all communicated entirely through their clothes. And leading the quite literal charge of this cast is Clayton Humberg as Johnny, the Jesus of Suburbia, the nihilistic antihero that Clayton Humberg gets so many opportunities to show off his really incredible acting range. Johnny is a character that has to go through this massive arc of being apathetic towards his life, to being angsty of wanting to make a change, to suddenly being vulnerable and genuinely regretful of the mistakes that he's made along the way. And Clayton Humberg makes every one of these emotional states so distinct, especially in his big songs, Boulevard of Broken Dreams and When It's Time. And he turns this character who, as written, is not very likable into a protagonist who is genuinely compelling to watch. Lauren Tenenbaum as What's-Her-Name is a fantastic compliment to Clayton Humberg's Johnny. And the arc that she has to portray is kind of the inverse of Johnny's, where What's-Her-Name starts out as being very vulnerable and very reticent and even romantic, and then goes towards the end to being this fierce, strong, full-on punk. Lauren Tenenbaum's performance on What's-Her-Name's signature songs, The Last Night on Earth and 21 Guns, were so sweet and romantic, which makes her rendition of Letter Bomb all the more fiery and explosive. Tenenbaum makes What's-Her-Name such a dynamic character. I loved watching her every time she was on stage. B. Meesey as St. Jimmy, they absolutely nail the cockiness and swagger of the character, embracing this primal, degenerate son-of-a-gun attitude that never lets up for a second. Though I do think there should have been more opportunities for St. Jimmy to be vulnerable. Like during the first section of Homecoming, when they are desperately trying to get Johnny to stay with them. B. Meesey was directed to keep up that smiling creep attitude throughout. But that really does not take away from the chemistry that Clayton Humberg, Lauren Tenenbaum, and B. Meesey share on stage, which is a truly dynamic tug-of-war. This was a love triangle that I was quite invested in seeing fall apart. After making his New Line Theater debut as Renfield in Dracula, Rafael da Costa returns as Tunney, and it appears that he's found a casting type for characters who are a bit messed up in the head. Like literally, Rafael da Costa in his interpretation as Tunney starts the show like a mad dog. Like he's getting up in people's faces, shouting with his full throat at them, picking fights with random people. He's just overall very unpredictable. Tunney is a character under da Costa's portrayal that kind of sets you on edge right away. And that interpretation is made all the more palpable when it's made clear that Tunney is legitimately frustrated with his lack of direction in life. And his interpretation of the song Are We the Waiting really lets us see how Tunney, and really anybody that is like him, can be convinced to join the army. But I think that credit has to go to the character of the favorite son, who is played here with really seductive charisma by Jordan Duncan. And when Tunney is actually in the war zone, Rafael da Costa makes his pain and agony really hurt to watch. And as I teased before when I was first describing the cast, his song, Extraordinary Girl, becomes a hallucination dream ballet, engaging in a sexual fantasy with his nurse, who is played here by Adrian Spann. Spann's nurturing, compassionate portrayal of the extraordinary girl shines, from the way that she carries herself to her super smooth, soaring voice. My only criticism of Extraordinary Girl is I kind of wish that Tunney and the Extraordinary Girl had choreography of their own to participate in the dream ballet, because as it was staged, it's just them fawning over each other while the dream dancers did their thing. Though I honestly think having the four of them dancing together in concert would be really cool to see. Deontay Bryant as Will leaves very little to the imagination in regards to his laziness. Him spending almost the entire show on his couch, as well as the whisper-like delivery of the song Give Me Novocaine, made that perfectly clear. And the manner with which Bryant portrays Will's clashing with Heather gives credence to how his selfishness would drive Heather to leave him. Deontay Bryant really does make Will's arc of being very numb to being angry and regretful totally believable. And Rachel Parker, too, gives a moving performance as Heather. Despite how rather underwritten the role is, she really does make the switch from love and excitement for her baby to exasperation and anger towards Will fully realized. And she doesn't really get that many vocal features, but her feature in The Last Night on Earth was particularly lovely. And everybody's voices were just fantastic. The instrumental arrangements for this show, which were composed by Tom Kitt, made Green Day themselves admit that the musical's orchestrations are superior to the originals. And that credit has to be given to the addition of a string quartet to the typical punk idiom. The musical director for New Line's production is John Gerdes. He is a musician who knows punk inside and out too, and he keeps the band pulsing and tightly coordinated, and especially because quite unusual, unorthodox for a band of this nature, John Gerdes leads the band on the bass, using the power chords from the bass to conduct the band. We do have keyboardist Chelsea Zack assisting Gerdes with conducting, however. The rest of the band consists of Gerdes' son, Xander, as well as Adam Rugo on the guitars, Jake Lubert on the drums, Steve Frisbee on the violin, Mallory Golden on the viola, and alternating on the cello, Michaela Cuba and Marie Brown. And the sound design, the sound design by Ryan Day, it's miraculous. Some of the best that the Marcelle has ever done. Perfectly balancing the sound of the band with the singers, making the lyrics clear as day. And for a punk rock musical in a black box theater, you want to know how hard that is to do? Hard! And every single aspect of this production taken together, New Line really does make American Idiot, even 20 years after it first came out, makes it feel so urgent and necessary. Especially now, because we are about to enter what is quite possibly the most important presidential election in our lifetimes. And so to produce a musical for the purposes of exposing how a government that genuinely does not care for its people will affect our youth, it really does feel like a call to action. But despite American Idiot being a very vicious attack on American culture and politics, it never feels preachy. And with New Line's production, the creative team was so intelligent, the cast were so committed, the band was rockin', and the tunes were serious bangers. To paraphrase the very ending lyric of the show, Green Day's American Idiot may be unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. And I really had the time of my life. Did you see New Line's production of American Idiot? If so, what did you think about it? And question of the day, what is your favorite Green Day song that is not from American Idiot, either the album or the musical? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below, let me know, and be sure to check out my website, jackreviewsmusicals.com, to read my back catalog of written reviews from all the way back in 2022. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more St. Louis musical theater reviews coming very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, long live the musical, and go vote!